Last year, you decided to allow Catholic priests to bless same-sex couples. That's a big change. Why?
To bless a homosexual-type union, however, goes against the given right, against the law of the Church.
Pope Francis just made a statement so shocking, it's sending waves through the entire Christian world. He's challenging the very core of what billions believe about Jesus, and it's leaving even the most loyal Catholics stunned. Could this be the moment that reshapes Christianity as we know it? What exactly did the Pope reveal about Jesus that has everyone talking? The Pope who defied tradition. From the moment Pope Francis stepped onto the balcony at St. Peter's Basilica in 2013, it was clear this wasn't going to be a typical papacy. Unlike his predecessors, he chose the name Francis, after St. Francis of Assisi, a name that embodies humility, simplicity, and care for the poor. But what's really striking about this choice is how it set the tone for everything that would follow. Pope Francis didn't just take the name for its symbolism, he began immediately defying expectations and shaking up long-held church traditions that had been untouched for centuries. One of the earliest signs that Pope Francis would not be your average pope came when he declined the opulent apostolic palace. Instead, he chose to live in the much more modest Vatican guest house. This move stunned both the Catholic world and the media. Previous popes had lived in luxury, surrounded by splendor and riches. But Francis's decision to live humbly reflected his focus on leading by example. This was not just symbolic. This was a direct message to the world. Francis was here to shake things up. But why was he so intent on moving away from the traditional trappings of power? The controversies didn't stop at his living arrangements. His views on wealth and capitalism have caused significant friction, especially among more conservative factions within the Church. Unlike popes before him, who largely avoided controversial economic commentary, Francis has openly criticized modern capitalism. He once famously referred to the unfettered pursuit of wealth as the dung of the devil. Statements like this didn't sit well with wealthy Catholics and business leaders who saw his message as leaning towards socialism. The Pope's message, however, wasn't about politics, it was about justice. Francis has repeatedly emphasized that the Church must stand with the poor and marginalized, not with the wealthy and powerful. But could his views on wealth actually be alienating influential Catholics? Beyond his financial criticism, Pope Francis has also shaken the Vatican to its core by challenging other deeply rooted traditions. One example? His handling of the Church's most sensitive issues, including LGBTQ+ inclusion. In 2013, he famously said, "Who am I to judge?" when asked about the role of LGBTQ+ Catholics in the Church. This statement sent shockwaves through the Catholic world, as previous popes had taken much stricter stances. While Francis hasn't officially changed the Church's doctrine on LGBTQ+ matters, his softer, more inclusive tone has opened doors to discussions previously off-limits. Behind the scenes, there are whispers that some high-ranking officials within the Vatican are unhappy with this shift. There are alleged reports of secret meetings between conservative cardinals who feel Francis is taking the Church too far off its traditional path. These rumors, while not confirmed, are certainly believable given the backlash from more conservative elements within the Church. Could Pope Francis's leadership be creating a quiet rebellion within the Vatican itself? His decisions haven't only ruffled feathers on social matters. When it comes to theology, Pope Francis has also been more progressive than most of his predecessors. Take, for instance, his views on environmentalism. In 2015, Francis released his encyclical Laudato Si, which emphasized the urgent need for environmental action. He didn't just focus on Catholic teachings. He argued that all humanity, Christian or not, had a duty to care for the earth. This strong stance against environmental degradation wasn't just revolutionary within the Church, but it placed him in opposition to major global powers and industries profiting from environmental harm. But here's where things get even more interesting. Pope Francis hasn't been shy about opening up discussions on topics that were previously considered untouchable. For example, in 2019, he allowed debates within the Vatican about potentially ordaining married men as priests in remote areas. This came as a response to a shortage of priests, especially in regions like the Amazon, where the lack of clergy has become a real issue. While the Pope hasn't officially allowed this change, his willingness to entertain the idea has sparked outrage from traditionalists, who argue that this could lead to even more dramatic shifts in church doctrine. As we dive deeper into Pope Francis's leadership, one can't help but wonder, how far is too far for a pope to push the boundaries of tradition? And how long until these changes trigger an even bigger conflict within the church? The shocking truth about Jesus' crucifixion. Pope Francis has never been one to shy away from controversy, and his recent comments about Jesus' crucifixion have stirred a whirlwind of reactions. During an Easter sermon, Francis made a statement that no one saw coming. He suggested that, humanly speaking, Jesus' life ended in failure. He referred to the crucifixion as the failure of the cross, a statement that immediately sparked outrage among traditional Catholics and theologians alike. How could the Pope, a figure representing the very foundation of Christian faith, refer to the crucifixion, the central symbol of Christianity, as a failure? Let's break it down. Christianity is built on the belief that Jesus' crucifixion was a triumph, a victory over sin and death, symbolizing redemption for all humanity. Pope Francis, however, emphasized that before the resurrection, Jesus' crucifixion was, on a human level, an apparent failure. According to Francis, it wasn't just a moment of glorious victory, but also a profound example of humility and suffering. He explained that Jesus' experience on the cross was meant to show the depths of human vulnerability and failure, something every person can relate to. What makes this even more controversial is how Francis framed this failure as an essential part of Jesus' ultimate mission. He argued that the suffering, abandonment, and humiliation that Jesus endured were the very things that made the resurrection so powerful. But this interpretation, while thought-provoking, rattled many in the church. The suggestion that Jesus was a failure in any sense didn't sit well with Catholics who were taught to view the crucifixion as a purely triumphant event. Francis further elaborated that Jesus' crucifixion is the ultimate act of love, not because it was a glorious defeat of death, but because it showed God's deep solidarity with human suffering. Jesus, in Francis's view, didn't come to avoid pain or suffering, but to experience it fully, just like the rest of humanity. He believes that the crucifixion teaches Christians a crucial lesson. True power doesn't come from escaping hardship, but from facing it head-on with love and compassion. This is where the Pope's message takes a sharp turn from traditional interpretations. But the shockwaves didn't end there. His comments raised even more questions about long-held Christian beliefs. If the crucifixion was, in part, a failure, what does that say about the resurrection? Pope Francis didn't go so far as to challenge the significance of the resurrection itself, but his reframing of Jesus' death certainly had many people questioning how they had understood the faith all their lives. Critics, especially from the more conservative factions within the church, were quick to accuse him of heresy, an allegation that has been whispered behind closed doors for some time. While no official church doctrine has been altered, the Pope's interpretation of the crucifixion has certainly reopened debates. Some Catholics have even alleged that Francis is leading the church into a dangerous new territory where centuries-old teachings are slowly being eroded. His Easter sermon wasn't the first time he had caused a stir with his comments about Jesus, but it was certainly the most intense. Could Pope Francis's vision for the church push it to rethink even its most fundamental beliefs? Interestingly, Francis's message resonated deeply with many people who felt marginalized or broken. Those who have suffered in their personal lives found comfort in the idea that Jesus, too, was abandoned and defeated in the eyes of the world. For them, this version of Christ's crucifixion wasn't a failure, it was hope. With so many questions lingering, it's hard to predict where this will lead. But it's clear that Pope Francis isn't afraid to push boundaries, even when it comes to the very core of Christian doctrine. A leadership style no one saw coming. Pope Francis's leadership style has been nothing short of revolutionary since the very start of his papacy. From his decision to live humbly in a guest house instead of the luxurious apostolic palace to his approach towards some of the church's most controversial issues, he has continually defied expectations. But what makes his leadership truly unique is how he balances humility with boldness, a combination that has left even his most ardent critics stunned. One of the most striking aspects of his leadership is his commitment to inclusion. Unlike his predecessors, Francis has actively tried to make the church more welcoming, especially to those who have traditionally been marginalized. This can be seen in his handling of the LGBTQ+ community, an issue that has long divided the church. While the official stance on homosexuality hasn't changed, Francis's compassionate tone has shifted the conversation. His infamous "Who am I to judge?" comment in 2013 was a turning point for many Catholics, especially younger generations who felt disconnected from the Church's more rigid teachings. But it also raised alarms among conservative factions. Could this more inclusive approach ultimately reshape the future of the Church? Another cornerstone of Francis's leadership is his emphasis on interfaith dialogue. He has made it a point to build bridges with other religions, something that previous popes hadn't prioritized as much. In 2019, he made history by signing a declaration of fraternity with a leading Islamic figure, Grand Imam Ahmed El-Tayeb, during a visit to the United Arab Emirates. This unprecedented move was celebrated by many as a huge step toward global religious unity, but it also raised eyebrows. Some conservative Catholics expressed concern that Francis was diluting the Catholic faith in his eagerness to promote interfaith harmony. They feared that by focusing too much on unity, the Church might lose its identity. Is there a risk that, in striving to be more inclusive, Pope Francis is blurring the lines between Catholicism and other faiths? His leadership style isn't just about inclusion, it's about action. Francis has taken on some of the biggest global issues, from climate change to economic inequality, showing that the Church has a role to play in modern problems. His 2015 encyclical, Laudato Si, is a prime example of this. In this document, Francis not only called for environmental responsibility, but also criticized consumerism and the exploitation of the Earth's resources for profit. He didn't shy away from naming names either, calling out industries and world leaders for failing to protect the planet. But this bold stance came with backlash. Some business leaders accused him of overstepping his religious role and meddling in politics. Others, especially within the Vatican, questioned whether Francis's focus on these global issues was detracting from the Church's spiritual mission. Is Pope Francis taking the Church in a direction that is too focused on worldly concerns? As if his bold actions weren't enough, Francis has also shown a willingness to reconsider some of the Church's most rigid rules. One example of this is his openness to discussing the possibility of married priests. In remote areas like the Amazon, where there's a severe shortage of clergy, Francis has floated the idea of allowing married men to serve as priests. While no formal changes have been made yet, his openness to the idea has alarmed traditionalists who see this as a slippery slope toward more radical changes. But perhaps the most shocking aspect of Pope Francis's leadership is how unapologetically he challenges the status quo. Whether it's his harsh critiques of capitalism, his push for more inclusion, or his willingness to engage in interfaith dialogue, Francis has made it clear that his papacy is about shaking things up. Controversial moves that shook the Church. Pope Francis's papacy has been nothing short of polarizing, and nowhere is this more evident than in the controversy surrounding his more progressive stances. From LGBTQ+ inclusion to his take on capitalism, each move he makes seems to ignite debate not only among everyday Catholics, but also within the very heart of the Vatican. One of the most talked about controversies is his approach to same-sex couples. Historically, the Catholic Church has been very clear. Homosexuality is considered a sin, and same-sex marriages are not recognized. Yet in 2020, Pope Francis took the world by surprise when he expressed support for civil unions for same-sex couples, stating that homosexual people have the right to be in a family. This was groundbreaking, given the Church's long-held position, and it immediately sent shockwaves through the Catholic world. But it didn't stop there. In 2023, it was reported that Francis had approved blessings for same-sex couples under specific conditions. While this move didn't change the Church's doctrine on marriage, it was seen as a step toward inclusion that left many traditionalists outraged. Critics, particularly from conservative circles, were quick to denounce this move. Cardinal Raymond Burke, a well-known conservative voice in the Catholic Church, was one of the most vocal, calling it a grave error that went against Catholic teaching. Others within the Church whispered about the potential consequences of this shift, with some alleging that Francis was opening the door to further doctrinal changes that could weaken the very foundations of the Church. While Francis has not officially changed the Church's stance on homosexuality, his statements and actions have created a significant divide. For some, this is a much-needed step toward compassion and inclusion, while for others, it represents a dangerous departure from the Church's teachings. Could this be the beginning of a split within the Catholic Church itself? Another controversial move that has stirred the waters is Pope Francis's stance on capitalism. Throughout his papacy, Francis has been an outspoken critic of unchecked capitalism, often referring to it as a system that exploits the poor. His infamous declaration that unfettered capitalism is the dung of the devil raised eyebrows globally and upset many in the business world. Wealthy Catholic business leaders, in particular, were left reeling. For years, the Church had largely stayed out of economic debates, but Francis brought the issue to the forefront, advocating for a system that prioritizes human dignity over profit. In his 2020 book, Let Us Dream, Francis doubled down on these ideas, calling for an economic system that focuses on the well-being of all people, especially the most vulnerable. This stance has gained him a lot of support from social justice advocates and progressive Catholics, but it has also made him a target of harsh criticism. Some allege that Francis is leaning too far into socialist ideas, which has led to rumors of discontent within certain conservative factions of the Vatican. Is Pope Francis too focused on worldly concerns? Or is he simply trying to steer the Church toward a more compassionate future? Beyond economics, Francis has also sparked controversy with his views on divorce and remarriage. Under traditional Catholic teaching, divorce is considered a grave sin, and those who remarry without an annulment are barred from receiving communion. But Francis, in his 2016 document, Amoris Laetitia, called for a more compassionate approach. He suggested that priests could offer pastoral care to divorced and remarried Catholics on a case-by-case basis, leaving the door open for them to receive communion. This was seen by some as a softening of the Church's stance, but it caused an uproar among traditionalists. Cardinal Burke, again a vocal critic, accused Francis of creating confusion and undermining the sanctity of marriage. These controversies have led to whispers within the Vatican of a potential schism. Allegedly, some conservative factions are so disillusioned with Francis's leadership that they have considered breaking away from the Church. While these rumors remain unconfirmed, they highlight the deep divisions within Catholicism today. Could Francis's more progressive views ultimately lead to a split within the Church? How Pope Francis is reshaping the Catholic world. Despite the controversies, one thing is clear. Pope Francis is changing the Catholic Church in ways that no one saw coming. His papacy represents a sharp departure from the traditional, more rigid leadership styles of his predecessors, and his global influence has extended far beyond the walls of the Vatican. One of the most significant ways Francis is reshaping the Catholic world is through his focus on the developing world. Unlike previous popes, who often focus their attention on Europe and the Western world, Francis has prioritized regions like Latin America, Africa, and Asia, places where Catholicism is growing rapidly. As the first pope from the Americas, Francis has deep ties to Latin America, and he has made it a point to advocate for the needs of the poor and marginalized in these regions. This shift in focus has been a breath of fresh air for many Catholics in the developing world, but it has also created tension within the more traditional European factions of the Church. Francis's global outreach doesn't stop at geography. He has also made significant strides in building bridges with other religions. His historic meeting with Grand Imam Ahmed El Tayeb in 2019 marked the first time a pope had visited the Arabian Peninsula, and the declaration of fraternity they signed was seen as a major step toward interfaith dialogue. This effort to foster relationships with other faiths has been praised by many as a much-needed move in today's increasingly polarized world. However, some conservative Catholics have expressed concern that by focusing so much on interfaith unity, Francis may be blurring the lines between Catholicism and other religions. Another area where Pope Francis has left his mark is in his advocacy for environmental protection. His 2015 encyclical, Laudato Si', was a groundbreaking document that called for urgent action to combat climate change and protect the Earth's resources. But what made this encyclical so controversial was Francis's scathing critique of consumerism and the exploitation of the planet for profit. He didn't just address Catholics. His message was aimed at the entire world, calling on people of all faiths and backgrounds to take responsibility for the environment. This was a bold move for a religious leader, and it positioned the Catholic Church as a key player in the global environmental movement. But could this focus on worldly issues like climate change distract from the Church's spiritual mission? In many ways, Pope Francis is leading the Church into uncharted territory. His willingness to challenge traditional teachings, embrace global issues, and foster interfaith dialogue has made him a beloved figure to many, but it has also alienated others. Some Catholics see his papacy as a necessary evolution of the Church, while others view it as a dangerous departure from core beliefs. What do you think? Are Pope Francis's bold moves shaping a better future for the Church, or are they pushing it toward division? Let us know in the comments. If you enjoyed this deep dive into the controversies and transformations of Pope Francis's papacy, don't forget to like the video and subscribe for more content like this. Thanks for watching.